behalf of the start of Grind, I want to thank Wassim and the Future Mobility Campus Ireland crew. They've done an amazing job. They've hosted us tonight. I know Barry as well is at a hand, and everyone's kind of gotten together to create a wonderful event. So, round of applause for Wassim. And that segues nicely into the start of the panel discussion. I feel like Jeremy Clarkson. This is like the stage for Top Gear. So no, great to be here. And I suppose the genesis for this event was January start of Grind. I would have met Wassim. We would have hosted Bobby Healy from Manage Own Delivery. And we were doing a lot of research, and that I was like, geez, there's a lot happening in this space. And Wassim was like, hey, come out and check out the campus. Came out a few weeks later. I thought, oh no, we'll bring it back into Limerick. And Barry was like, we'll never get the cars into Limerick, man. So I said, hey, we'll bring everyone out here. And we threw on a bus, and thank you everyone for making the journey out today. So I'll introduce my panellists from left to right. So on my furthest left is Kieran Campbell. He is market lead for Ireland for Polestar. Sitting beside Kieran is Wassim. He is COO and co-founder of Future Mobility Campus Ireland, to his right is Julie Garland, who's CEO of Avtrain. And finally, to my right here is Barry Lunn, CEO of Provizio. Thank you all for joining us. So I want to break the ice for yourselves and for our audience here today. So going from right to left, starting with you, Barry, what is the one big challenge you've had to tackle in the last 12 months?
Starting with the easy question. Asking a startup that is like opening up a can of worms, I can tell you. One big challenge.
He's going to half-load in one now.
It's a fair question. I think the big one for us was probably this has been our year of coming out. We've been in the cave for the last couple of years, and that suited us very nicely. Building, it was a conscious decision. Let's build something pretty awesome and bring it out. But coming out, there's a huge amount of technical challenges that came with that, because we wanted to be a live perception demo in CES. So biggest show in the world, biggest audience in the world, taking on one of the biggest technical challenges in the world. What could possibly go wrong? So I think, everyone in the company now hates me, but it was a huge success, and I think that's kind of, but it set a bar as well. Unfortunately, we're now the guys that do live demos. It's nice being the company that says, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, whereas now we're the guys. So that's the bar. So I think it was a huge personal challenge as well, because obviously putting, like any company, putting your baby out in front of the world, they can tell you your baby's ugly. And so that's a bigger challenge probably than the technical one. And, part of you thinks everyone's going to think it's awful. Another part of you thinks everyone's going to love us and it's going to be great. The reality is usually somewhere in between. And it's kind of worked out well so far. Phone hasn't stopped ringing, so to say. So yeah.
And if you haven't seen the CES photographs, I suggest you look them up. It was a pretty awesome introduction to Provizio. So,
you're talking about the ones with the vehicle and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Not the night time. Yeah. Okay.
It was in Vegas. What happens in Vegas, Barry? What happens in Vegas? Julie, you're up next.
Yeah, so I think probably the regulatory environment that we live in. So we do training and certification of drone pilots and operators. So we got an EASA regulation, which is the European Aviation Safety Agency, back in 2020. And that has had a bedding in period over the last 2 to 3 years. There was implementation dates, so we only got used to the regulation, and then the next thing we'd have another implementation date, so we'd jump on. There was a transition period that was put in place for operators, so it was getting the industry and bringing the industry along with you, where they had just got their authorizations and the next thing they had to change them again. So we've really gone through a tough time bringing the industry along with us in the regulatory environment, but we're also very heavily involved in developing out the future regulatory environment. So it's trying to balance both. It's trying to make sure that we're very fortunate with the regulator that we have here in Ireland, with the Irish Aviation Authority. They've been extraordinarily proactive in implementing the regulation and to its fullest extent. And they've been very accommodating, and their own resources within the regulator have really built out. But we need probably at least double, if not treble, the resources that are in the regulator at the moment. And when you look at what they put into manned aviation and you look at what they put into unmanned, we've nearly got the same size departments at this stage, and it still needs to be about 3 times bigger because of the growth in the industry. So the regulatory environment keeping up, and what happens is technology overtakes the regulatory environment, and then what we've had happened is the regulatory environment overtakes the technology, and then the technology is catching up. So we've had this leapfrog, and if they could just parallel track it, would make it so much easier for us. But.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about some of the regulation stuff in Ireland in a little while, Julie. So thanks for the introduction. Wassim?
Challenges. On a personal level, is sleeping. On a professional level, it's doing everything and almost everything. Coming sometimes to the office to clean stuff, to drive the car, to do things, and that's probably making me unable to sleep properly. But forget about that. So challenges here is basically for the last 12 months basically is to finish this project or this product that you're in. Getting to cope with COVID, getting to cope with contractors, getting to cope with the shortage in semiconductors, getting to cope with the cost inflation and all of that to build a business or to build an environment that is accessible to everyone is a major challenge. I think everyone sees the same challenges in their businesses anyway, but for us it's even worse because we are not for profit. We're not here for generating revenue, for putting in our pockets. It's more for making this environment accessible for startups, SMEs, multinationals, researchers, etc. And we opened doors last July. We still dared doing it even though the building was not fully complete, even though we don't have the full data center in place. That's the major challenge that we had here for the last 12 months. And probably another thing is that we started this as a land mobility testbed, and we said that we transitioned to air mobility. Getting to know what is like in terms of regulation, in terms of how do we do things. Luckily we have Julie and other partners that were also helping us lifting that burden, but it's basically getting challenged with new innovations and new technologies. And I think it's a good challenge, and that probably the challenge that is keeping us surviving and energetic even though we don't sleep the night before. That's it.
Thanks, Wassim. That's brilliant. Kieran?
Yeah, for me, so on the 4th of January last year, I was employee number 1 for Polestar Ireland, and how that came about was I saw a job. I was with Volkswagen. I fancied a new challenge. I read the job description. I applied. I had 2 conversations, and I've spent my career from 2007 up until November 12 months ago in automotive, and I was pretty certain I knew an awful lot about it. Then I was given the keys literally to Polestar Ireland, and I was told make it work. We're based in Gothenburg. Ireland is a satellite of the UK, but there was no blueprint, there was no guidebook, and I was the only employee for 6 weeks. I mentioned to Peter, my dad rang me on the first day about lunchtime, and normally he kind of ring me in the evening time, and he said, everything okay? He said to me, and I said, fine. He said, you've no one to talk to, because it was literally just me, a laptop in my home office. So from that day, it was figure out how to bring a car brand to life in Ireland without having the support of 10, 15 people around me. It was incredibly complicated. It only took 5 months and 4 days to register the first car, but I wasn't counting. Revenue couldn't understand what we were trying to do because they were very supportive if I could find out who to talk to. Everything was paperwork, and I mean printing it. I had no printer, of course, so my wife was printing paperwork off for me. And there was one form in particular I mentioned to Peter. On the form you have to tick if you want to be a distributor or a retailer, and Polestar both. And this was a concept they could not understand, even though Tesla, which Joachim drives, was again aliens. So I got some really great guy. He was based in North Dublin. He rang me. He already got my phone number. And to make a long story short, I spoke to him for 45 minutes and said, right, I'm making a win here. He said, I can't help you. I said, why not? He goes, I'm North Dublin, you're Dunleer-Rathdown County Council. Who do I ring? I have no idea. So every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, we had a new market growth meeting. So there was me and 50 other people on the team's call, all based in HQ. There's certain responsibility to get the market set up. And every week they're looking at me saying, when is the first car going to be registered? And eventually we got there. So we're at the stage now where the foundation has been poured. We have 330 cars will be on the road by the end of this month. So we're a little country in the whole Polestar space. We're 27 countries globally. but we're ranked number one for people who test drive the car to order a car 90 days, 60 days, and 30 days. So I've gotten this far. The team's grown a little bit, but yeah, the startup grind was pretty challenging. But we got here.
Nice plug of startup grind there. That was
Exactly.
seamless.
There we go. Just
Anytime to say
seamless.
We'll get back to you in a while, Kieran, because I really want to chat about bringing a new car to market, bringing a new car brand to market as well. Polestar's 6 years old as a breakaway car brand, so it'll be interesting to talk about that and some of the trends you're seeing in the EV market as well. I think it'll be good to touch on. Barry, back to you. So Provizio is your 5th startup by my count, according to LinkedIn. I don't know. I mean, you've had incredible success over a decade and a half. You're probably one of the best entrepreneurs to come out of the Midwest in a long time. So, real privilege to chat to you today. I think the founding or the genesis of Provizio is interesting because you're coming out of an aerospace background with Aralis. And I remember chatting to you in like 2019. We were in the Strand. We were at a Limerick Chamber event or something like that. And I could see you had the idea and you were in this stealth mode, Silicon Valley talk, you know. And you could see you had the idea. You were talking about, look, we don't exactly know what it is yet, but we know we have something here. So I suppose take us from maybe 2019 to the current day and how all that's come about.
Yeah, it was very, and yeah, I'm glad you said 5, so we're not going to talk about the other 4 then. It's all success, right? Yeah. So yeah, no, there's been lots and lots of failure along the way as well, which is all part of the grind. Otherwise it'd be called, startup heaven or something, and this wouldn't be nearly as interesting. But yeah, in terms of, back then it was very much, a concept. Like we obviously had the experience in Aralis of building kind of a new type of radar, 4-dimensional radar. We'd seen what that could kind of elicit, but we'd also seen like huge challenges around scaling, and also we were looking at little things like AI coming over the horizon. We were also acknowledging that the entire autonomous industry was bullshit, and that always dies. Like everything is cyclical. We're in a bear market now, we were in a bull market. Like everything, and this has gone on for the history of startups. So you get these phases where you can get away with murder, but there was a reckoning, and it's always coming, and you're never wrong, predicting that stuff. So that was kind of, we were looking at all of that and going, right, had this idea for what we call 5D perception. But the big challenge was, right, how are we going to do it at scale? Are we going to be able to get onto silicon? Because you have to get onto chip to build that scale. And the other side then was the proliferation of GPUs, right? So it's kind of accepted now, right? So you've NVIDIA and you've all these other companies doing GPUs. But we kind of had to take a leap that they were going to become the mainstays of this industry. So that thankfully, while we were trying to solve all the technical problems and make all of that happen, the world kind of came along with us. So it's definitely, and the lads will kill me for saying this, because I keep saying nothing's ever going wrong, lads, and then everything explodes. But it's definitely been the most, the best journey I've been on in terms of things going our way. Autonomy got found out. We got millimeter waves significantly onto silicon, so there's chips available now that can do the things we want to do. And GPU prices are going in the right direction. And they're now, vehicle manufacturers, like, look, Jaguar Land Rover vehicle here in front of me. I mean, they've announced that from 2025, every single vehicle they put on the road is going to have an NVIDIA GPU core in it, right? So that wasn't, when I spoke to you, that wasn't happening, right? But we were kind of predicting that that's the way the world was going to be. So that's kind of what we've been doing since. Is it was a couple of years of just hard building, right? We first had to build the hardware. And nowadays, the hardware is almost easy, but then the software kicks in. And so it's been a tough slog, but slowly but surely emerging and, getting happier as we went, to the point now where it's lovely now, right? You're doing live demos. You're not saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Just get in the car, come out, we'll show it to you. Because there's still people out there saying, what we're showing live can't be done. And I love that, right? And we tell them, get in a plane, come over here,
And when you launched the CES, was obviously you're a bit terrified, and you have to rig the Defender out over there. You're renting out a Defender. You're putting on your technology and you're showing it to the world. It's one of the biggest cameras of its kind in the world. What was that immediate feedback like? Was it obvious and apparent? Where people are like, geez, this is way better than LiDAR? Like, what was the...
Yeah, no, I think you're always, don't forget as well, people have made decisions, especially like OEM, like the guys that make cars, right? They're huge. The guys that supply to them are huger, right? Like tier ones are massive. Bosch, Conti, these are giant companies. Like they're just so big. So like you definitely don't ever in this industry get someone going, oh my God, we were all wrong about everything we did, and thank God you guys came along to save the world, right? That just doesn't happen. So we weren't kind of expecting that. But there certainly was a credibility that we got from being there and doing it. We were the only, so like this area, you know, there's 200 billion of investment gone into perception sensors in the last couple of years, right? Like nuts stuff, right? An awful lot of that into LiDAR companies that are slowly but surely, a lot of them, you know, struggling. But there will be winners, right? I mean, LiDAR is incredible technology. We use it, and we use it for benchmarking and testing and training and all that. So we weren't like over there going, oh, we're going to, you know, kill all of these fellas. But we got a huge credibility of going and doing a live demo. We were the only live radar demo at CES. And that was great, and we were small. Now, other lads had much more impressive stands, and we kind of played at our advantage, you know what I mean? They had the stands, and they had all the fancy stuff, and we were like, do you want to go in the car? You want to see something actually working? And it kind of worked, and an awful lot of it...
We had to move a lot of chairs to get the car in here today, so he definitely likes showing off the car.
Yeah, we do, yeah. We're very proud of it working, you know. And Luke was being really mean and pulling up beside all the other demos, which had vehicles covered in crap, right? Like you've seen autonomous vehicles where there's, you know, bits hanging off of everywhere, and then it was raining and they were throwing their coats over the sensors, minding them, and Luke was just lumping up with this sleek-looking Defender with, you know, hardly visible sensors, and that stuff even helped, you know, and asking people, can I put your coat in the boot? And they're going, is the compute not in the boot? And it's like, no, the compute's all in the sensor. And that kind of stuff. So that kind of scrappy startup, being an asshole kind of stuff that you can get away with. You can't do that when you're bigger. Right?
No.
You know,
You're just a dick if you're doing your bigger. For startups, like, leave them off.
We can get away with it.
Julie, I'll switch over to you. So Barry's talked about great timing and maybe, you know, the CV kind of helping him and failing, whatever. Your CV is particularly interesting though, because you're not just the CEO of Avtrain. You've had an interesting background that's brought you to this space.
Yeah, for sure. So I started off in the last century as an aircraft maintenance engineer, as an apprentice with Aer Lingus, and then went on. I'd always wanted to go flying. My grandfather had me in the cockpit, and in the cockpit of an airplane, and also in a flight simulator when I was 8 years old, and that was me done. I was going to be a pilot. Did about 10 years of engineering, and then went off, did my pilot license, became a pilot, flew with Air Aran, CityJet, training captain, and then decided I wasn't going to retire from the left seat. So went on and studied law and became a barrister. So I did 5 years as a barrister, a lot of aviation law. But the point of that is, you know, through all of those jobs, and actually when you look back on it, I started off in a closeted environment in a state airline as it was at the time, moved from that then into kind of, you know, business environment, then going on flying away from home a lot more, working for, you know, companies, working for Air Aran was a startup when I was working for it, the ATR operation, you know, and then going on from that as a barrister at law, becoming a sole trader and, you know, being self-employed. That was, you know, so they were actually all steps. I had no idea that I was actually moving through that towards becoming a founder and giving up a nice fancy job.
Your destiny was in the stars.
Fate was there. It was laid out for me, and you know, but you don't realise your trajectory until you look back on it, I think, and, you know, hindsight, you know, if you had all that over again. I suppose the big thing with where that brought me to is, you know, to give up a job that pays and puts money in the bank every month, and actually giving all that up and you know, fancy job and everything.
Lawyers don't give up their law careers for startups usually, but
yeah, and I had gone into as a director of compliance for Norwegian Airlines at that stage, so I was actually C-suite in a major international airline when I decided to give it all up and become a founder. What came to me was, I mean, back in 2014, 2015, I could see where the drone industry was going to go. And I watched it. I didn't do it. You talked about timing. You started this all off about timing. I didn't do it until 2019, until I knew there was a European regulation coming into place and that we could actually grow and scale, build a company that could grow and scale. That was the timing. But I spent 5 years in the industry before that, part-time, making sure that we were aware of what was going on, driving what was going on, driving the industry, putting a professional umbrella over drone operations so that we maintained a really positive, regulatory environment, but also reputation within Ireland for what we were doing and what we were building out. Oh, that's so much better. Oh, that's what it was. Those bloody drones calling all that noise.
Sorry for those seeing me texting. I was taking this Dermot to take it off.
That was the drone that was making all the noise.
I was just thinking we're having to live with that for the whole show, so that's great. That's great.
But what it does do, so the background comes towards being a founder in a company like Avtrain, is that it's the technical and the actual operational experience and the legal stuff. And that's, to cross over those three pillars, because that's what the drone industry is. It's those three pillars. And often they can be siloed and people don't step over those boundaries. And you can't do that in this industry, because it's the first time ever that we have technical mitigations for flight operations, that we have a quagmire of legal stuff to try and get through to get airborne. So it's a combination of all those. So that's what brought me into it. Yeah. I mean, and it's, the background has served me really well, but it's not one person, and that's the
it's still not straightforward, I guess, being a CEO. So no, thank you for that, Julie. Wassim and Kieran, sorry, I know it's probably coming to you quite late, but we'll get around to everyone, don't worry. Wassim, I suppose Julie's talked about timing, Barry's talked about timing quite a bit. You also had a cushy number in Jaguar Land Rover. So what gave you that inspiration, that spurt, that let's go do this thing? It was yourself and Russell as well.
Yeah, so basically, prior to joining JLR, and I've been in other businesses where I do data management and kind of regular kind of business where we do software development, project management and all of that. But before that, I was doing my PhD in Galway, worked as a postdoc as well for a couple of years. And then I kind of kept my interest in research and in kind of discovering the undiscoverable. Sometimes you just spend days and months and years maybe, and then you just end up saying, oh, well, actually it doesn't work. So I like that kind of challenge, even though it is, I don't know, it's very hard for others to understand it, but ask researchers, they will all tell you the same thing. And I see heads nodding there. So it's basically, when I joined JLR, my very first mission was, in addition to doing a bit of technical management, I had my team to do all of the software deployment of the solutions that we had, but also part of my mission was to kind of identify the right funding mechanism to help us build this. And I was leading the proposal for writing and getting to the funding that we built FMCI with. So to me, what basically it was helping me in JLR is that kind of interest in both academia and research, as well as the business side of things. I worked with a startup as well before, and with startups, and probably would you have a lot of them here, you do everything. So you don't really hire an engineer to be just a software engineer. First question you ask them is, are you okay to do a bit of project management? Because they always say yes, but are you okay to probably, make tea, do sales, go and visit customers? That basically, in that spirit of being in a startup spirit, is something that also was helping to kind of get into this challenge. I won't speak for long. I want Kieran to share.
Kieran's listening patiently. He's happy to listen. Kieran, just on Polestar, so there's an interesting background to that car company. So it used to be part of Volvo, and then they spun out Polestar into its kind of own car brand. You want to give us some background on that?
Yeah, so I suppose Polestar originally was a tuning firm of Volvo for a long time, and then in 2011, 2012, Volvo purchased it, so you can get Polestar engineered. Then in 2017, as a consequence of Tesla, Polestar was brought to life. We launched with Polestar 1, which is the only internal combustion powered car we have. It's a plug-in hybrid, but from now everything is EV and EV only. We have Polestar 2, as you can see down here, and we're running a test drive event quite successfully here, which is fantastic. But I suppose, like everybody else said, it's all about timing. The whole automotive industry is changing, and I suppose COVID probably activated this change an awful lot quicker. We are a direct-to-consumer brand, and as we were all locked in, let's call it that, for a couple of years, we all became a lot more comfortable buying everything online. And that's how we sell our product. We have one single location in Dublin. The team and the staff there, they can't sell you a car, even if you wanted to buy a car from them. Their point is to listen, to educate, to communicate. They can bring you on a journey if you want to hopefully buy a Polestar. That's obviously part of my role. It's a QR code, but you complete that journey yourself. But I suppose the companies now, we're changing. We're still figuring out who we are. Globally, we have just under 3,000 employees. Ireland, we have a team of 6. It will be 7. We will grow a little bit more. So there's huge complexities. There's huge challenges. My mentor I have internally, I mean, he said to me once, "Have I had the 4 o'clock in the morning issue yet?" Like you mentioned, lack of sleep, and yes, I have, because you wake up, oh shit, what do I have to do today? And there is there's a structure, but then it's how do we control the chaos. It's an incredibly exhilarating company and role, but it's incredibly overwhelming at the same time. I have two young kids, so lack of sleep is now just a fact of life for me, as well as the job. But it's to be able to piece it all together and shape what we're doing as a brand is really unique, and we're on track to be successful.
Fantastic. No, it's great to hear. And you're a great example of an entrepreneur. I think you've been handed a borderline startup task. You know, obviously it's an established company, but you know, you're starting from zero. You're the first employee, so no, fair play. It's great to hear. Barry, I guess when you think about where Provizio is now, can you kind of give us, I suppose, and kind of, we'll try and speed it up a small bit, but give us a background on 5D, what that actually is, and then I want you to talk about, beyond cars, what are some of the other civilian applications?
Cool. Yeah. No. Thanks. And before I do say that, far be it from me to ever say anything nice about Wassim, but he definitely underplayed what they've done here, himself and Russell. Like this isn't like this was going to happen and the two guys applied for a job and got it, and they were the ones that fitted this place out. They, you know, a lot of us actually sat around the same table and talked
This
about
is the first time he says something positive in front of me.
and I won't be repeating
It's
it.
recorded.
I won't be. But no, like a bunch of us sat around a table for many years, the same table, talking about this stuff needed to be here in Ireland, this stuff is in the UK, this stuff is in America, all of that fun stuff, and never did anything about it, because that's what happens around tables. People talk and nothing ever happens. Two guys quit 2 bloody good jobs, set this up from nothing, and it's fucking incredible. Yeah. It's incredible. And just from our perspective, from a Provizio perspective, we're here on the vehicles, bringing people in here on a regular basis to demonstrate. That wouldn't have happened in Ireland. We, part of the founding team's in Pittsburgh, part of them are in Belfast. The test vehicles, the plan was Pittsburgh, right? Where Argo are, where Google, where everyone else is. But it's here now because of these guys. So, round of applause for.
Yeah, 100%. He's really touched. I'll actually stay on that point. We'll come back to some of the technology in a little bit, but
Don't tell Russell.
it's you're all collaborators here on this stage today. So I suppose it is credit to the work yourself and Russell have done, Wassim. I suppose, Julie, from your perspective, how big a part has the Future Mobility Campus kind of played in your startup journey?
So we've partnered with FMCI along the way as well, with FMCI, and also huge support as FMCI do from Shannon Airport Group as well. But we looked at this, and I mean, Russ and myself met years ago, and I met Wassim shortly afterwards at actually Electronomus down in Kerry, when it was like ages ago. And we talked about the air piece of like, this is an amazing test bed, it's an amazing idea, it's amazing, and this is still ideation. But when you look at that and you look at the air piece and you look at the drone port that's there, I was down in Fiumicino 2 weeks ago, and they brought me out to their vertiport in Fiumicino Airport, and I'm like, we have one of these. Like, this is exactly what we have in Shannon, except ours is even better. We've got a whole structure there around it, and we have infrastructure ourselves.
What's a vertiport?
Sorry, a vertiport is where these new air taxis are going to take off and land from. Yes. So where these eVTOL aircraft, so vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that are going to be passenger carrying, that ultimately will be fully autonomous. This is a vertiport is where they will take off from. It's like a helicopter pad. but it has a big blue V on it instead of a H.
Gotcha.
Um,
A V
and,
instead of a H, really?
yeah. V for vertiport. It's difficult. But they will also have charging infrastructure and all that kind of thing. And we're very fortunate here, and we've got the cooperation with Shannon, with FMCI as well. So it's a testament. And as Barry said, like, these things happen because people do get together around tables, but it's the people then who enable them to happen, and Russell Wassim really did that and built that out. And you know, you come up with an idea, and then the next thing it happens and it's being done rather than it just being talked about. So we've had an incredible journey with them over the last couple of years.
Well, I have just a follow up here. It's the first time Russell met with Julie and he came running and said, look, Wassim, we found an incredible person. She intimidated me in the discussions. Like, she knows everything. She had an incredible profile, being an engineer and then doing this and then barrister-in-law. I said, are you sure it's barrister-in-law after all this? It's not bartender or something? And he said, no.
Barista.
and then it's basically building the FMCI air element was mostly driven by the ambitions of Julie, the Shannon Airport Group, John Drysdale, he's not here, unfortunately, here today, ourselves, and it basically is just to get people that have the same kind of spirit, the same kind of ambitions. But then we said, look, I think we do have good trust with Enterprise Ireland. We can go ahead and apply for the next round of fund, and we get something. We got $1 million, we built the vertiport. That helped us get the LOR project for building the U-Space, and Avtrain as well is partner in it. And then probably we'll be going soon for a next round of fund for building a proper air taxi vertiport, and that's something that probably will bring more and more attraction to what we're doing here in the region.
And could there be air taxis for the Ryder Cup? A little birdie told me.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But just to lead on from what Wassim said, like, it is about enabling the industry, and it's about enabling the growth of the industry. So what we have at the moment, we have a structure with drones at the moment. So we have that structure there, we have a regulatory structure, and it gives us an opportunity to grow within the regulatory environment that's there, to build that really solid foundation towards having air taxis, eVTOL. The reality is we'll be carrying freight before that. And, you know, it's a testament to Ireland and to the work that's being done. ASL Group, who have over 170 airplanes, carry 100 million tonnes worth of freight every year, have done their LUC, which is what MANA have as well. So this Light Unmanned Aircraft Systems Operator Certificate. So they've done their LUC. So they are an airline that are flying airplanes that now want to get involved in saying, the drone industry's here, we can operate within that regulatory environment. So you see within the eVTOL industry and within the air taxi industry, a lot of kind of what they call wooden dollars moving around. So you've got lessors, you know, ordering aircraft from OEMs, and then airlines ordering those aircraft. So it's all just moving around. But there's no reality.
Bigger pieces of freight here. So where Bobby Healy's delivering coffees around Balbriggan, we're talking about big.
This will be hub and spoke. Yeah, so a large aircraft landing into Dublin Airport with an igloo gets taken off, and a drone is sitting there, and it picks it up and it brings it over to the Amazon distribution centre out in Naas. And it gets broken up there rather than it being broken up at the airport in bonded stores. You'll have off-site bonded stores, all that kind of thing. And there's no reason for that. And Shannon is a real hub for that, because we've got huge, and like we did flights for FedEx 2 years ago. We did for the integration of drones into supply chain logistics.
Yeah, something Wassim said, it's kind of mad having a drone port so close on airports. When we saw what happened in Dublin, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, as long as it flies here safely, it flies everywhere. So that's basically our philosophy, is that come and validate what you have here close to the airport. Nobody will tell you anything if you fly it anywhere else.
Yeah. And Kieran, I suppose from Polestar's perspective then, it's almost the perfect place to do test driving. Because obviously you've only got the one retail outlet really in Dublin. So when you're doing your test drives, you have to send cars out to people's homes. So this is perfect for you guys.
Yeah, so when we have one single retail location, I mean, when we sat down at the beginning of the year to map where we need to be, I mean, for me, this was perfect, because it combines what we are, mobility, electric cars, and the whole concept of the campus. And I must say the facility is fantastic. And for me, I've been living in Dublin since August 2000. I'm not from Dublin, you can probably get by my accent, and my wife was simply refusing to move back to Mayo with me. But it's just refreshing that there is these developments outside of Dublin. Dublin is where a lot of people live, to be fair, don't get me wrong, and a lot of business there, but it just shows what can be done. I mean, I got down here in just over 2 hours, electric car all the way, which is fine, and it's good that we're bringing people. I think you mentioned yourself, you're running an event outside of the city. Often we get afraid of, we have to just be in the main cities all the time. But this facility, and it's hopefully will grow over time, and it's great to be here. We have 62% bookings for the few days we're down there, and Stephen is sitting over there who supports some of the events. So it's great to be able to activate and animate live, and it was a perfect fit for us. And I mean, I can see us come back here again before the end of the year. So it's a really good and a great asset to have. So be proud of it.
And a great asset for the region. Fantastic. Julie, can we talk a little bit about drone regulation? Jesus, I think it was 6 different incidents in Dublin Airport over the kind of 2 months start of the year. Like, are you tearing your hair out? Like, is that setting you back, or is it just kind of making it more obvious that we need companies like Avtrain helping out?
So, you know, what happened at Dublin Airport, and the problem is you can't legislate for idiots, you know. So no matter what, you put legislation in place, and idiots will also, so you can't do that, you know. And this is what happens: is there's legislation in place. You're not allowed to fly at airports. You would think that would be a really obvious thing. One of the guys who actually was arrested. I thought they were going to cut off my mic there because I had said I was like, she's not allowed to talk anymore. One of the guys who was arrested had actually sent the drone over to his girlfriend's house so his girlfriend could wave out the window at her. So this is the kind of thing you're dealing with. It wasn't malicious, it wasn't nefarious, it wasn't anything else. So that's all it was. Yeah, so that's all it was. You know, and when you look at the level of disruption, so what we need to do, and you know, what we need to do is when somebody flies a drone at an airport, we need to have the equipment at the airport that will actually track the signal from the drone back to the controlling device, so that you can highlight the person, they can get arrested, and they can get thrown in jail. And then that will act as a deterrent, and that's the kind of thing that people will learn from. You know, if the publicity drives that the Aviation Authority do, that we do, that, you know, that we promote the industry, and we spend all of our time, we've been since 2014 shouting from the rooftops about how wonderful drones are. If it's dull, dirty or dangerous, a drone should be doing it. You know, we have all of these, you know, really positive use cases for drones. And it only takes those kind of incidences that suddenly there's this huge negativity built up against them. And the problem is, as I say, it's normally caused by idiots. You know, a lot of this is not actually nefarious, even though people have suspicions around maybe it was something to do with the noise lobbying.
Sabotage,
and just to try and cut it off. But you know, the reality is that it's not. It's just plain idiots.
Yeah, let's do something about it. Barry, I suppose it was interesting, you know, Julie's in a really, really high growth market, but I suppose drones have had so many false dawns, you know what I mean? Billions of dollars have been spent on drone technology startups, and that's expanding along. I suppose hardware was always an issue with some of the early drones, because, you know, we were trying to build hardware in Europe, and we weren't importing from Asia, which is kind of what Bobby's kind of figured out eventually. So I think from your perspective, like there was a quote there, you know, you did a piece with John Kennedy. The price of your radar kits were up towards 100K when you were dealing in aerospace, and your goal has kind of been to bring that down closer to 10K and have every single car run one of these devices. So how do we get there?
Yeah, 10K would be great if that was even. It has to go again. Let's go down to 1K, and then let's go down to $100 from 100K. Yeah, which was the nice thing about the aerospace industry. People, the kit is more expensive. You can put more expensive sensors on it, and no one really minds. But automotive, it's millions of vehicles, and it's funny when you mention legislating for idiots. Well, we wouldn't have a job if there wasn't idiots on the road, right? And we have to accept we're all kind of idiots, and we're almost trying to protect ourselves from that. And that because it's very important that especially a lot of this technology, it tends to come through into super high-end vehicles only, right? And it takes too long to filter down. And so if you take autonomy, speaking of false dawns, that's one of its biggest problems. Like while autonomy has failed, I mean that in a ubiquitous autonomy, because we all thought none of us were going to be driving, right? And my kids were never going to have a driving test, right? But actually, autonomy does exist, right? Crews are on the road 24/7 in San Francisco right now with autonomous vehicles, and Waymo as well, and some others to a lesser extent, right? So it does exist. But your average cruise Waymo vehicle has $250,000 of sensors and compute on it, right? So that isn't going to be ubiquitous anytime soon. It also has issues with what they call the edge cases, you know, things like rain and fog. We know a little bit about that here in Shannon, right? So those are the kind of challenges that have meant it hasn't become ubiquitous.
And just to clarify as well for the audience, because not everyone probably knows the story of Provizio and stuff like that, your goal is really to remove car crashes. It's not to support autonomous driving in the future, it's to make cars safer.
That's the place to start.
Yeah.
That's how we looked at it. Solve the here and now problem of us all crashing into each other. Remove that kind of ethical dilemma as well, where people are saying, you know, we're going to have autonomous vehicles tomorrow, and someone goes, hang on a minute, the computer's in charge. What we want to do is put the sensors on your vehicle that'll make you a better driver. That'll warn you when you're about to do something stupid. That'll warn you stuff you just can't see, right? We can see multiple cars ahead. We can see when they, you know, start to decelerate. You can't see that, right? We can, so we can give
How
you the
far
warning.
ahead can it see actually?
600 meters.
600
so it's
meters.
pretty significant, right? And it bounces up around vehicle to vehicle as well, which is really helpful, right? So it doesn't have a shadow issue, which is really nice, and it's giving you the exact velocity of the vehicle, so you can, and then it starts to make decisions. So that's the kind of, you know, what it enables. So it's a no-brainer, right? And by the way, when I say 600 meters, that's in the fog too, right? So you can see 10, 20 meters if you're lucky down here in deep fog, right? This can see. So that you can see where you very quickly get to that ethical dilemma starting to fade away, right? Because it's pretty obvious who should be in charge when it's foggy, right? You know, and those are the kind of things that I think are important. So what we're trying to do is get to that place where you have the data, where you can show, not making bullshit projections so that you can get your stock price up, but actually going, here's the data. In this scenario, the car is a better driver than the human, and therefore it takes over. We already have it. It's called emergency braking. So, you know, most vehicles now have automated emergency braking that kicks in. So it's extending that, and eventually autonomy comes. Whereas the autonomous industry kind of took the other route of like, let's drive around in fucking circles on the track. And then they were like, oh, let's do this in Arizona, the perfect optical environment where everything's set up for it. Like that's to me, that's nonsense. Like imagine you could have an impact on, and solve the idiot problem, right? Because while we're stupid when we drive, right, we're actually very sophisticatedly stupid. Because no matter what sensors that have been put on vehicles and safety measures that have been put on this, in the last 20 years, road deaths haven't shifted, right? 1.35 million people killed every year, right? 50 million more people are maimed every single year. Right? Imagine you invented that technology tomorrow. Like no one's going to get into it, right? So that to me, I think is really, really interesting. And it doesn't matter what technology you bring in. What happens is we find a new way of, you know, distracting ourselves. We're really, really good at that, and mobiles didn't help, right? So I think that for me is kind of the approach. It's not like, you know, it wasn't like a eureka moment. It's like a bleeding obvious thing. Like let's solve this really big problem, and then slowly but surely prove we can solve and autonomy. Like I want autonomy.
Yeah.
Like, I want to enable that.
How far away do you think it is?
It's always 20 years away.
Yeah.
And in 20 years it'll be 20 years. No. I don't think it's as far away. Right? We have autonomy. Yeah. We've seen the perception stack that it needs. Right. What we're trying to get to is to prove that our sensors and software can deliver that same level of perception that Cruise and Waymo are doing. Right. But doing that for way, way less price. Like our sensors in series production, from 2025, we'll be ready for series production into automotive. You're talking like those sensors I sell for $100,000, $100. Oh. That's what we've been up to. Like that's, and unless we get there, it never becomes ubiquitous. So if anyone tells you something that's costing 10 grand is going to become ubiquitous, they're bullshit.
Sorry, just on that. I mean, I left Dublin today. I mean, you mentioned what you're doing is fantastic. I mean, I got on the N7. I set my adaptive cruise control at 120. I can set the distance. It's not obviously the level that Barry's at, but I mean, the car I steer. It helps me if I need to. The car in front of me brakes. My car brakes for me. When I need to change lane, it accelerates for me. So you're sitting and steering. But again, the emergency brakes you mentioned as well. So it's cool seeing Night Rider. Our kid flashing at me as well. So that's where we're going to get to. But I mean, and unfortunately, it's the squidgy pink person in the car that makes the mistakes. And so whatever we can do to advance, I mean, Polestar is developing. We will be using LiDAR. You're going to touch earlier on. in Polestar 3 next year. So but you're right, it's not just about driving loops around San Francisco, it's how do we bring this technology and make it available to everybody, because we all need a car in most circumstances, but it's to make sure that the people in the car and the people outside are safe. I mean, there's a lot of people killed every year, unfortunately. My wife was in a very serious incident 5th of September last year. She was stopped on the M50 on the way to work. She was really static, and a guy came through the back of her in a 8-ton rigid Scania truck, and he hit her so hard she went 4 lanes across the M50, and she ended up bonnet facing into the middle wall, and 4 cars hit her as she was going across the road. The car saved her life without a doubt. The guy in the truck was on his phone. So again, if his truck had your technology, that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and that's a very good example what you're putting on, because you're probably not allowed to boast about that, but I can. You're putting Luminar LiDAR onto your vehicles. Luminar were probably the only LiDAR company that came out and went, actually, the focus should be on safety, not on autonomy. All the other guys, essentially, Luminar's the most valuable LiDAR company in the world. They're getting series production contracts from Polestar. Like, that matches with Volvo, Polestar's brand, right? Like, safety first, first people to put the safety belt on. So that's really important. Like, they're proof in the pudding. And when it comes to, like, share price is a great way of finding out actually what the real world thinks, right? And it's just interesting to see, like, obviously they've taken a bat like everyone has in recent crash, but they're still a multi-billion-dollar valued company, when most of the multi-billion-dollar LiDAR companies are now worth around 30 million, haven't spent 500 million, right? So I just think that it's a really good example of focus on the right thing.
Correct.
And the world rewards you.
Yeah, it's focusing on the challenge versus the opportunity. Like it's an interesting point. Wassim, I suppose, look, we've heard from Barry, we've heard from Julie, I've had a lot of successful startups through here. Do you see a challenge for yourselves now recruiting the next crop of Provizios and Avtrains and companies like that?
So our challenge is twofold. The first one is hiring the right people for us, for our team, growing our team as well, and building the capability and the skills that we need to support other startups, right? Which is basically something that, in fairness, the region has a huge pool of talent. The universities that we have around us, TUS, UL, NUI Galway, or University of Galway. So look, you see how many engineers they get graduated every year, and they all get to very nice positions all around the country and beyond. And that's basically, the problem is how to retain and keep those people here, as well as the other problem for us is to kind of identify the right training that we need for this new innovative space. And I wear another hat. I see Helen here as I'm chairing this Shannon Chamber SkillNet steering group, which basically looking at identifying those skill gaps and help identify those from business side, as well as informing the training institutions to tell them this is what we need as well. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is as well is to identify and bring startups, the likes of Barry's, Avtrain and others, to come and sit and use this facility. This facility is not for us, it's for them. So I always say my big challenge is to get rid of Barry. It's not really true. So I want 10 Barrys to be in this place, because first of all, and I like a term that Julie calls always is a co-opetition. We create a collaborative space with a bit of a competition to help us build together competitive products, which basically what we want to bring to the region. And again, having startups like Provizio, I don't think they qualify anymore as a startup, because because they should start now thinking about the next level.
I love that you call us upstarts.
Don't say that too loud.
Upstairs, yeah, I like that.
We're upstarts rather than startups.
Upstarts.
Yeah.
Nice. Julie, you made a good point when I was chatting to you about drone technology companies now basing themselves in Ireland, and there's a good reason for that. So do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so we've actually done some work. We're an Enterprise Ireland client company, so we've had a huge support from Enterprise Ireland, and but we also now started working as well quite closely with the IDA. When the IDA are out in the market trying to attract talent and trying to attract companies into Ireland, we've been brought in now on many occasions when companies are looking to. So IDA are out there talking to companies about coming to Ireland, and then when they come to visit Ireland, they're bringing us into the meetings to say these are the kind of reasons, and demonstrating the expertise that's available, and the likes of the cooperations that go on, the CESAR project we have going, the likes of FMCI here, what's going on in the industry. But I mean, we've just got so much to offer. We've got a really positive regulatory environment. Brexit has been, for our industry, has been really positive, because when you look at it from an aviation point of view, the UK they just removed themselves from the aviation industry because they're completely insulated, and having a UK license is of no benefit anywhere else in the world apart from in the UK. So we were left as the last native English speaking as a primary language. So when you look to the US, and also you look to the UK, if they want to go and get their drone license, or they want to develop technology around drones, they want to be in an environment where they can communicate easily. So Ireland is a really obvious place. We have a really positive tax regime, inbound investment, and a positive investment environment as well within Ireland, which let's not even get into that. But so there's multifaceted, but the aviation regulator here as well, massively supportive for the industry as well, and the growth of the industry, and have been since really foresight since 2014.
The future is bright. It's great to hear.
Onwards and upwards.
Yeah. I'm going to finish up shortly. We'll go to the audience for Q&A. I just want to touch on micromobility, scooters, e-bikes, last mile stuff. Wassim, what are we seeing at the moment? Barry tells me you can't do rideshare scooters in Ireland.
That's
like the legislation isn't there yet.
exactly. With the same legislation or the same bill, it also includes testing autonomous cars on the roads, and that's why we cannot do that yet. So in that regard, Ireland is taking a kind of very cautious baby steps towards adopting or allowing to have e-scooters on the road. First
you drive
of all,
them on the footpaths in Limerick, though.
Well, you still can buy your own, You still can buy your own, and you can drive it, and nobody's going to impose anything to you. But I think the problem is not to have your own e-scooter. It's more to have that e-scooter available for the public to share and use. So insurance, regulation, safety, it's all of that is still up in the air. It's not really that much kind of approved or accepted by the government representatives. The micro mobility companies are doing huge amount of effort really to include more and more technology into those e-scooters to show that they're sustainable, they're safe, they're good. We're going to get helmets, we're going to have the insurances. You can still see them in small campuses and private spaces that are operating and showing that it is safe, and they're still kind of small scale tests, let's say.
They're just so compact, you think of 20 cars on the road, you think of 20 little e-scooters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's incomparable.
Exactly. And then as part of our journey as well is, you might have seen when you're coming through the control room at the beginning there's one of the screens that I think it's still there. It's showing the CCTV looking at one of the test facilities that we have at the back of the industrial estate. It's a small city layout with a little bit of tracks for e-scooters. We want to work together with the e-scooters companies to say this becomes like a certification space for them to show that I can avoid obstacles, I can avoid pedestrians or other e-scooters, I can park or identify where my e-scooter has been left and should be within certain space. And it's something that we hopefully will be able to kind of support in that. Another example, like Provizio is looking at adopting their technology as well, and I guess a use case for micromobility.
You got my next question there. So Barry, do you want to chat about some of your other applications for Provizio technology?
Yeah, and scooters, is one of them, and it's kind of like the problem is, right? One series production design win with one car manufacturer is bigger than the entire market for scooters ever, right? So that's the perspective on it. So why are we doing it? And that comes down to more the mission side of things. We want to make the technology available. And also, there's another thing as well where it really annoys people when you start working on scooters, because they're going, how the hell are you going to get to a price point that you can go on a scooter, right? So there's a little bit of that. But like the way I look at the world is
You like a challenge.
Yeah, but it also should start with, like, we've almost become as bad as the Americans with our car-centric country here, right? Like, it should be completely the opposite. Like, the pedestrian should come first, and then get to the unpropelled bicycles, and then you get to something like a scooter, and then you get into the larger and larger vehicles. So the safety of those as they go, so the onus should be on the biggest vehicles on the road to be the most safe, that they can see these. And when I started working on some of the autonomous programs, the big autonomous programs years ago, none of them could see motorcycles. Like, and they were out there driving on the road, right? Like, they just weren't able to detect them because of the speed and also the size, right? So like, there's all that, and so that's a big thing for us, is making the technology available. You can't target the world as a market, right? And everything that moves in it. So what we're doing is essentially we're making the technology available. So if anyone in this room fancies taking on the scooter market or taking on some of these adjacent markets, we're making the technology available as a common infrastructure that you can buy and build your company around that and go and you target that market and do that. So right now we're working with Voy to do some proof on that stuff, but like, we can do, you know, a lot of the stuff Wassim talked about, that sense and avoid, you know, seeing pedestrians, all that. We know the speed of the ego vehicle, we know the speed of everything else around it. So you can
I can buy the box and put it on anything I want and start to roll it out.
Absolutely, you can buy the, well, not right this second, right? It's coming, Luke, right? It'll be soon. It'll be coming soon. Damn. Yeah, but that's exactly it. You can buy the board and put it into your own box, right? And put it with your own technology, and that's it. Because we're already, like, yeah, you meant, like, and for us, obviously, the attraction as well, right? It's not completely altruistic. Is data, right? So our sensors are based on an artificial intelligence backend, essentially, and those backends are data hungry. So we want to feed it. And so if we get onto lots and lots of scooters and everything else, then we get more and more data. So right now, right at this minute, so we're on scooters with Voy, which is a big Swedish company. We're on harvesters down in Germany. We're in mines in Finland and in Pittsburgh at the minute. All applications that there's no radar. It's never been there because it hasn't been able to be used in those kind of environments up to now. So there's some really cool stuff we're getting. Some of it is like, oh Christ, this is awful. But some of it is really good information that we're able to feed that data-hungry machine, and it will make everything else safe, right? Because you just can't ignore everyone else on the road.
And we want them on drones.
And you want them on drones. Biggest problem with drones is regulation, right? And the frequencies that we operate at, and it's all that fun stuff. But like drones are, thankfully though, a much simpler environment, because once you go up, there's a lot less traffic, right? And that helps, right? So you can use other methods. But yeah, absolutely. We've a bunch of people going flying them too.
Yeah, amazing. I'm going to wrap things up. I'm going to give everyone just 30 seconds, just, what's your big hope or ambition for the next 12 months? I know I started with the last 12 months. So I'll start with you, Kieran.
Yeah, I mean, the space that we operate in of electric vehicles, I mean, from 21, total entry volume of EVs was 8.7%. Last year was 14.9%. This year, for the first time since 2008, EV sales have overtaken diesel, which is fantastic. Diesel technology is still good. I'm not saying it's not, but I mean, people are making the step for what I believe is right. I mean, I was coming out to the tunnel in Limerick, and there was a car, I won't say the brand, I don't want to offend anybody, and there was just clouds of black smoke just billowing out of the car non-stop. I mean, my car doesn't emit. I mean, me and Peter spoke. I mean, Polestar there says a really ambitious target to build a car that's completely carbon neutral by 2030. We've no idea how we're going to do it, and we admit that, but we're trying to bring in partners to get to that point, and that's what we have to do, because we have to make sure that we're making a big effort to make a change. So that's 2030. For the next 12 months, I'll figure out how to sleep a bit more and make sure Polestar becomes more and more visible and aware.
Thanks, Kieran. Wassim, your big ambition for the next 12 months?
For the next 12 months, being able to keep the lights on in this building. And probably that links to another topic, which is sustainability. I think we didn't really cover that too much, especially in mobility space. So obviously we have an EV next to us. We have like the Barry's team working with all EVs and plug-in hybrids, except this big one that looks very dangerous there. But anyway,
Combustion
it's like,
engine.
yeah. Wait, well, I'm not looking that side. Yeah, so it's basically we're looking at supporting the region in that space as well. There's a lot of hype happening as well in terms of sustainability as well as advances in air mobility. These are the main two topics that we'll be targeting in our next rounds of funds, and we're going to be targeting creating more innovative spaces for, I don't know, space for recycling EV batteries or I don't know, finding a second life projects for them. And hopefully, yeah, we'll sit again in 12 months here and we'll talk about the new FMCI branch.
Fantastic. We'll come back for it.
Thanks.
Julie.
We're fundraising to build out a software platform to enable the drone industry. So it's all about trying to make things simple, trying to keep things streamlined, trying to produce its compliance verification for operators. So it's looking where they can come into, you know, a centralized point, look at what they want to do, produce standard documentation, that goes to the regulator. Regulators are happy, they can process applications much quicker, and it's enabling the industry and enabling the industry growth. As we go through the different risk levels, we'll do it on risk management, verification of compliance, operations manuals, technical verification of compliance as well for building out design verification reports, so certificates of airworthiness for drones.
And you're moving away from being pure service and training to building a product that you can scale. And I know a great software development company as well. I might be able to give you a hand with that, so no worries. Barry, last word.
All right. At the risk of sounding like a Miss America contestant, I'd take world peace anyway in the next 12 months. I'd settle for that. But on the selfish basis within Provizio, like we're super focused, probably for the first time, and we're at that stage. Growing up, I wouldn't say we're going to be startup for a long time yet, but series production automotive is what it's all about for us. So partnerships, if you don't hear about partnerships being announced from us in the next 12 months, we're probably fucked. So hopefully we'll be announcing some serious partnerships over the next 12 months, and they'll all be around that path to series production. We're not one of those startups that thinks we can do everything ourselves. We're trying to partner, and I think that's a big goal now.
Brilliant, brilliant, great to hear. Round of applause for our speakers. I'm slightly over time, apologies. So we'll open up the floor to questions, and tell me which speaker you want to answer.
So my question is to Barry. I was just wondering, these LiDAR scanners, are they going to be able to detect the road markings and the traffic signals, or is that just the traffic that's 600 meters ahead?
Yeah, so on a great jacket, by the way, my old friends in NASA. So radar's ours. Yeah, that's where realism comes into it, right? With the best will in the world, we will never be able to read road markings. We'll never be able to read road signs. We'll never be able to do that kind of stuff. And that's where cameras come in. So you'll see beside our radars here, we've got cameras. So we will always be using so we're an active sensor, and then cameras are a passive sensor. So we will always need them to unlock that kind of semantic data. So we work with them very closely. We actually enable the fusion then of that vision data with the radar data, and that's obviously really important. So, but you're right, the cameras can't see out to those kind of ranges, right? But in fairness, when you are looking at 600 meters, you are talking about on the highway, you know, being able to identify, you know, we can identify free space out to about 500 meters on the highway, right? You don't really need to know exactly where the road markings are in that regard, right? As it gets closer, then you get into the more specific stuff. But you do, especially a truck, you know, safe stopping distance for a truck is almost 400 meters, right? And there is no sensors on the road right now that can see to any of that type of range, right? So that's where it becomes really important to see these super long ranges.
I suppose most people in the room might have, like, be familiar with the, I don't know which year it was, the series Night Rider, and the very smart car. And you mentioned that scene distance of 600 meters. It got me thinking, in the scene from Night Rider, I think there was a pursuit or something, and the car could tell a couple of meters ahead whether it was safe to overtake around some sharp areas or something like that. And I'm just thinking, can this technology see what's the scope? So are we looking at specifically just perpendicular, so head of the car, or there's a certain maybe 80-degree angle or so? How far can it perceive?
Yeah, fair question. So first thing is you need to see 360 degrees, right? We can't, as in personally. We use all sorts of mirrors to try and solve that, but the sensors need to. But if you take that forward-facing sensor that's on there, its field of regard is 120 degrees, so it's quite wide. And then it can see 40 degrees, right, in elevation. And the reason for that is sometimes you're going up hills and sometimes you're going down them, right? And especially places like San Francisco, you need to be able to have that field of regard. And then what happens is, so actually in series production, where this will end up is you will have 4 radars, one on each corner, you'll have one at the back and one at the front. So giving you that full 360 degrees with full overlap, because you're right, you have to be able to see all those to actually do the things that Knight Rider. And it's a really important way of determining if someone in our industry is talking shit or not, right? Because if their vehicle doesn't have all those sensors on it, they're not going to be enabling autonomy anytime soon, right? Because you cannot over the air update physics, right? So it's a really good way of calling some people out.
Do you watch Knight Rider to get ideas?
Absolutely.
Hi guys, my name is Guilherme. I'm assistant lecturer at TUS at London, and today it's like by far the best day of the year because I got contact with all the I have a question to Kieran, and depending on his answer, I'll have a question to Barry. So first, I had the chance to drive the Polestar today, and I was impressed. I felt like in an amusement park with that speed. And one of the features that actually caught my attention was the one
pedal brake,
the 1 foot drive mode.
Yeah.
That you can drive the car, you can accelerate and brake the car just using the accelerating pedal.
Yeah.
And it calls my attention that I'm pretty much interested in the user interaction, human-machine interface, and for some reason, the automotive industry is not touching the steering wheel. The steering wheel is a device that, for me, it's outdated, and in your answer, I forbid you to use the word regulations, because I know that probably this is one of the barriers to get rid of that. But nowadays, you can control, I don't know, like an Airbus A380 using a joystick, and no one's touching the steering wheel. We put assisted modes, hydraulic, electric, but no one's getting rid of the moment arm that actually it's not used anymore. So I would like to hear a bit from you, like why do you think that that's going to change? If the driver will have a chance to control the car not using a steering wheel. Of course, not counting autonomous modes, like when the driver has a chance to actually manually drive the car.
Honestly, it's not a question I can answer. That's something way beyond my pay grade. But I mean, I think we're so familiar with hopping into a car and grabbing the steering wheel. Would it be cool to control a car with a joystick? Perhaps. Would people be able to adapt to it overnight? I don't know. I'd say apples and oranges comparing a car to an airplane, to be fair. I don't know a huge amount about flying airplanes, I'm not going to pretend. But look, the regulation as it stands, I mean, we were talking about regulation earlier on. Automotive is pretty narrow. There's lots of creative ideas that people can consider, but when will we get to a point where it's no need for a steering wheel? I don't have an answer to that question, unfortunately. At some point in the future, maybe we go back to the Jetsons, which was kind of very futuristic at the time cartoon. We're not in spaceships just yet. I think steering wheel is a reassurance for people that they can put their hands on it and crucially use the steering wheel as opposed to just lean one hand on the window and 2 hands and control the car, because I think you mentioned the braking on the truck is 400 meters from the stop. Cars are moving very, very fast. I prefer to be holding the steering wheel and be in control of that car. I'm not saying technology won't happen, and it will, but right now I'm comfortable where we're at.
Guilherme, like, if you want to send the crew down from Athlone, Wassim will give them office for a couple of weeks to figure this one out.
Yeah, that's okay.
Can I just jump in and just on one point in that? I mean, when you look at a control column in an airplane versus a joystick, it's like people are like cats and people are like dogs. Do you know, it's that different. You've got Boeing people, you've got Airbus people, and you know, some of them, like, and when you consider the joystick method, normally it's completely fly-by-wire. There's nothing else connected to it, so it's an input sensing. Whereas in a control column, generally it's actually there's maybe some kind of mechanical linkage as well. So you're back to the technology behind taking the steering wheel out of the car, as well as the human interaction with that as well.
Yeah, I see a lot of redundancy and also usability. And that's my question for Barry. On the usability side of things, I see a lot of sensors that you're implementing, and you mentioned about overriding some of the driver inputs in case a situation, the road event might be dangerous. So how are you guys addressing to build trust with the user? So if I think about, for example, my grandma with her 1970 Beetle, and I say, look, you're going to drive this car here, and it will eventually take over control or override your input to the steering wheel to avoid an accident. What are you guys doing to avoid the user to go and just turn off the feature?
Yeah, so I think you've just answered your first question with your second question, by the way, right? That's the reason why the steering wheel is here to stay. I'm probably one of the few people who has driven a car by joystick and remote control. It's a horrible experience. As humans, we like to feel in control. So one of our investors is Bobby Hambrick, who's like the OG of this space, autonomous stuff, which is, you know, he's one of our investors. So he created the first by-wire. So I've had the fun of driving that. It's not nice. So no time soon. But you're right. Like for us, the technology has to disappear. There's a good reason why that sensor is, like, we're a very early stage startup, but the sensor's already embedded into the vehicle. We're trying to make it disappear. It has to be the same for the user experience. It has to disappear. So you can't feel like you're being supervised. You're just being nudged in the right direction is how we would look at it, right? So we can already control the steering column. We can already guide you and, you know, and bring you back into the right path. You know, stay in your lane. Don't go into this zone. And that, to me, is where the trust builds up, because it's all about proof points. And when the technology on the vehicle, we've all done it, like we've all gone to overtake and it's, oh, Jesus, there's something, right? When the technology starts to do that, you're suddenly going to start trusting it, right? It's the classic James Bond scenario, right? The girl doesn't trust him, then he saves her life, and the next thing, we all know what happens next, right? We're not looking for that outcome, but once we save a few lives, we start to see trust build up, right? And that's where we're trying to go. But it's also learning from the driver, right? Because we're not the company that knows it all. So a lot of it is building in and that's why AI is so important here, right? That we're learning from the driver as well. So we tell the driver, for example, they should brake, and they don't, right? We want to know that data too. That goes back into training the engine as well, because we don't know everything. We haven't seen every scenario. We never will have. What you're trying to get to is the 99.9999, and that's really what we're trying to do is make it a two-way street. But the way to do that is not to tell all truck drivers you're going to be out of a job because autonomy is coming. That's not the way you build trust, in my opinion.
Another one here, Marcus.
So obviously, the you don't think about autonomous driving. It's a joke. I'm not better. So obviously, there might take some time for autonomous driving will be fully implemented. So what do you think, in the meantime, is possible to avail of the features using the open route, like let's say open pilot, for cars that technically are capable to offer some of the features? Because I didn't realize how much I want a car that has all the driver assistance until I talked to my colleague last week. He said it actually saved my life, and on the cheaper side. I thought about it. There's a few times where I get a good Friday, driving like somewhere 5 hours, and you're nodding off and listening to really against the machine that keep you awake and you get coffee. But what do you think in terms of, like, okay, you're gonna have the official routes, but in the meantime, is there a chance for like a non-official routes for people to avail some of the functionalities of the drive-by-wire using the open?
Yeah, absolutely. Big believer in that as well, because again, it's back to that whole thing of, like Linux, right? We can't No one person can solve everything. So yeah, we would definitely see that as being an interesting one. So for example, back to that thing I was talking about earlier, that we're making it available. That's an aftermarket essentially sensor. And if you look at what you just talked about, I have those features in my car and they are brilliant, right? That thing of just driving from here to Dublin and almost never having to really drive, you're just there holding on and letting it do. And it's really, and it's just like having a second driver as you do it. The problem is so almost all of those systems are a combination of two-dimensional radar and camera, right? That's what all those systems are. So you're seeing some companies come along, you mentioned one of them, right, OpenPilot, but they're using cameras only, right? So it obviously can't be as good as the systems that basically the entire automotive industry is using the combination, right? So, and the reason you don't see radar, by the way, is because radar's a pain in the ass to work with, right? And so there hasn't been this kind of plug and play sensor until now. So that's a big thing for us, is to bring the radars to that market, which will allow people to retrofit to existing vehicles. Because you're 100% right, ubiquitous autonomy or ubiquitous safety doesn't exist till everyone can afford it, right? And even, whatever about it coming into new cars and slowly filtering in, emerging economies aren't going to be having those new vehicles and all that in the meantime. So yeah, it's a big part of big supporter of those type of things. We've been talking a lot about building a vehicle up on a completely open source platform here. I think this is the place to do it, where you kind of leave the egos at the door and we'll all go open source in this and see what can happen. But yeah, I think I do believe that's the future, 100%.
So I'll just add a little bit to that as well, because aftermarket products are not as much regulated as the automotive, whatever gets into the car. So anything you see on the car, the design of that started 7 years ago. So whatever you see here, it has been thought about 7 years ago. So whatever gets into it, it needs 7 years before it gets released to the public. So that's why probably most of OEMs prefer to kind of take it slowly before they get to including all of these features into the cars. And that's why they are a bit expensive to add in, even though sometimes they are on the car itself. It's just the software activation that is needed.
First of all, thank you. It's been very educational evening and much appreciated. Kieran mentioned apples and oranges there, aviation and automobiles, but I think it's very close to from what I hear, it's very much apples and apples. So, Barry, with a lot of your technology, I see weather radar, unmanned, autopilot, TCAS, maybe go around, take off, go around. But do you think there, maybe to go back to the aviation element, do you see a role of like what we have in aviation, ATC, for road autonomous vehicles in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a role for anything that can make the vehicle safer, right? And that's it. And our technology comes from aerospace industry, right? I mean, we developed it originally back in previous company for the aerospace industry, and now it's bringing that down to the price point, scalability that can go into automotive 100%. But I think all those technologies and if you look at even the vision systems and all that, it's all come from those environments. So 100%, I think that's the way to go. I think aviation tends to, although with drones now, its appetite for cost isn't as high, so it becomes a little more, but it becomes a bigger market with drones. So that's how you make it up, right? So, but 100%, I think that's the way.
Just jump in there just for a sec. One of the things that we're doing here is a digital sky demonstrator, and that's about managing lower airspace. The whole idea of being able to manage that lower airspace and look at drones and interoperable eVTOLs, drones, everything else, is it has to be a fully digitized system. It can't be a traditional air traffic control system where you have people talking to other people. It has to be machine to machine. And I think exactly the same would have to happen on the road. You can't have a human being interfering with this amazing technology that is the coolest thing ever, that can make instantaneous decisions, thinking, thousands and thousands and thousands of decisions per second, whereas a human is looking at an entire environment. So, the digital sky demonstrator that we'll be building out here as part of the ALU Air project is looking at that, and it's looking at U-space, so it's unmanned airspace, and it's that airspace below 500 feet where aircraft traditionally aren't operating unless we're here beside Shannon Airport. And that management of that airspace and how we integrate that with air traffic control systems as well. But it must be digitised and it must be machine to machine.
So I'll add to that as well, because, well, just to clarify a bit, the ATC, which is the air traffic control, is basically anything that is flying here, all the data should be through the air traffic control. The reason for that is we want to increase safety. That's one thing. The other thing is that, well, there are private jets, but let's say civil aviation, you don't own the aircraft. So you don't mind if, well, you really want to have that aircraft controlled and monitored all the time. Now, when we talk about private cars, I don't want anyone monitoring my car if I own it. That's the air traffic management piece. If we bring it to the land, it's different. Probably you're talking maybe about the closest thing would be fleet management solutions, and that would be an owner that has its own fleet and wanted to have a sort of an ATC for them. But I think the way we're moving with the micro-mobility abundance, with the self-driving cars and the cost on all the sensors and everything, probably in the future we don't need to own the cars, that there will be shared cars, and in that space probably an ATC for certain regions would be needed. It's not air traffic management, it's probably land traffic management, and then probably that would correlate as well with the introduction of new taxes of ICE cars being in certain areas. That's probably something that will emerge in the next 5 to 10 years maybe.
I think it's kind of amusing that you don't want to be tracked or have your data as a private car owner, and you drive a Tesla. Breaking news, Wassim. Breaking news.
I'm not going to say anything. I have Polestar here and have Barry that hates Tesla, so I have to change it, yeah.
On a serious note, it already has happened, right? So the data, the over-the-air updates, they're two-way. Right, you're sending data back when you do it. You know, on all of these.
I hate that I don't accept that, but anyway.
Yeah, no, yeah, good luck with that. No, but it's true. I mean, Mobileye, obviously, be the biggest vision kind of company in the world. Essentially, just the on-the-edge AI, the first company to do that. They're quite open with it. They have a map of the entire world, courtesy of all the drivers that have installed their sensors on the vehicle, right? So they're all ready, you know, they have a certain level of it, but it's not for altruistic reasons or to make, you know, it's to get mapping data and upsell it. So I think it's kind of already happening. It just has a different name.
And we need it for the drone industry too, because we base the risk management of drone operations based around the population density and where that population is moving to, what that population density is at different times of the day or night. So all of that comes from cars, mobile phones, and all of that data that's being constantly fed.
Okay, and I suppose I have so many things that I'd love to say, but I suppose first of all, just a couple of comments. It's really interesting listening to you about how you reimagined your sector, how you looked at technology or the problems or what success meant to your customer base, and reimagine the solutions rather than, I suppose, iterating on what's already existing. So I thought that was really interesting to just see how you're doing that. And then what kept jumping out is that word regulation. So I work in university, we work with government all the time, and interesting actually came up recently that on the Innovation Index, which is an index that's done around the world, that while we perform quite well in a lot of ways, that actually public sector innovation is really, really poor, and it's killing us in terms of that index. So it's like, I don't know, 12% out of 100% in terms of what we're doing. And I suppose just because we're talking about it so much today, how much is your involvement helping to innovate the regulation and to push people that would be very conservative, risk averse? So I'd love to hear, is there opportunities for people here to kind of help with that innovation?
I certainly jump in on that. So we work with, we've worked with Deeper, we've worked with the Dublin City Council to develop out their drone strategy and innovation for smart cities. So we look at all of the air piece of smart cities. We're working with KPMG around that, but we're particularly working with the Department of Transport as well, and obviously the Irish Aviation Authority. But so I'm the Vice Chair of the Unmanned Aircraft Association here in Ireland. As part of that, I sit on JEDA, we love our acronyms, which is the Joint European Drone Associations, which is literally an association of associations. And as part of that, I sit on JARIS, which is the Joint Authorities for Rulemaking on Unmanned Systems. JARIS is made up of international regulators from all over the globe. 70% of it is international regulators. So these are people from the aviation authorities all over the globe, and they make up 70%. And then we have the industry stakeholders body. So that's the industry feeding into all these regulators. And the idea is to try and develop out a global standard of regulatory environment that then individual states, particularly states that don't have very developed regulatory systems, that they can adopt. But I mean, EASA, the European Aviation Safety Agency, took SORA risk assessments, specific operations risk assessments, and adopted it 100% into their European regulations. So there's a global standard there, and it's about pushing that and driving that forward. So you're driving a global standard that can be adopted in individual nations, so that we get this stability of a regulatory environment across the world. So we're not trying to jump into different regulatory environments every time we go and do something. But it's critical that we innovate within the regulation and within that regulatory environment, and then that we get government support in order to actually properly implement that regulatory environment. Because there's no point in having it and then it being, or that there's a positive, when I say positive enforcement as well of the regulation, it's about, allowing for the regulation, for what the regulation drives, that which is around innovation, is actually allowing that innovation to take place. So we need performance-based, risk-based oversight and performance-based.
Be at the table.
Yeah.
And just, because obviously your company would be able to start with it. So no, thank you, and too many questions. I'm not going to wrap it up there, I think. It was absolutely fantastic, and well
done. Thank you, Gillian. Fantastic. I've nothing else to say, just thank you to my co-director and to Ben as well for all your support during this event. Huge shout out to Wassim. I know we've given him loads of rounds of applause, but thank you so much for being a brilliant host, brilliant support, and we couldn't do it without you. And finally, thank you to each of my speakers, to Barry, to Kieran, to Wassim, and to Julie. I forgot your name. I'm looking at you all day. Brilliant. Thank you all very much.